I don't remember last week. I was
Those bits and pieces come back.
yeah. After yesterday, I'm kind of glad I can remember anything. All right, let's get this to a screen share. And let's do entire screen and share. And shrink that down. Good. So we should be set up. Once we're done, we should have a YouTube video of this, utilizing the magic of Google Air. Move over so I'm not in the way of the screen. Okay, so let's go ahead and pull up Revit. So we're going to do a couple of different things today. Essentially, the big focus is we're going to focus on creating kind of a parametric families. And we're going to start out real basic to kind of go through the process, kind of similar to what we did with that circle last week. If anybody wants, I can go ahead and recreate the circle so everybody kind of sees how that functions. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a series of families that will kind of embed into the next one. And at the end of the class, we'll end up with a curtain panel that's built up from all of these pieces. And then, of course, that's a panel that we can apply. It'll be intelligent to any kind of a building mass or however we want to kind of do that. And I also have a couple of interesting things I'm going to show you guys. Just kind of little fun, cool stuff. Compliments of some of the guys in the Revit community. So let's get the class open. Now I went ahead and posted up all the stuff from last week up onto the Google Drive, so everybody's got access to that. That's essentially from 325. That was those kind of the sphere I did, some of the other things that I kind of showed you at the very end, that kind of wavy space frame, and that weird hedgehog-looking thing as well. And it's out there. It's for you guys to play with, and you can kind of do what you want with it. The circles are out there as well as the kind of a tractor point piece as well. It's out there for you guys to mess with. So go ahead and close this guy. Nope, we don't need to save those changes. And we don't need to save changes to this. Hide that. And then what was this guy? Okay, that was that fella. We don't need to see him. And that was his piece. We can actually leave him open. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start really, really simple, really, really basic. And all we're going to do is create basically a profile shape. And what this profile shape is going to be is it's just going to be something that we're going to extrude along a path that we'll use later on down the road. But this is a good opportunity to take a look at kind of setting up some of those dimensional constraints that we had talked about last session. So we'll go up to Revit, go New. And for this guy, we're just going to go Family. And of course, our list of all the default Revit families will come up. And the first one we're going to start with is a profile. Now, there's a couple of options for profiles in here. I don't typically choose any of them in particular. I'll usually just go with profile, because what you can do is you can actually tell a profile if it's supposed to be a mullion profile or a rail profile or a stair nosing profile, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, after the fact. They're all just copies of this one family we're going to use. So we'll go ahead and open up that guy. So we've got our profile open, and of course, there's nothing in it at this point. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a shape that's parametric that we can work with. And this will just give us a kind of introduction of kind of developing some stuff here. So we'll start out real simple with this one and just go create. Like I had said last week, create insert view, the same kind of stuff all still applies. So we're going to want some line work. Oops, no. And right now I'm just going to generically draw a rectangle. Doesn't matter the shape or size, I just generically threw something in there. I just need the shape. What we're going to do from here is we're going to start adding dimensions and parameters to really control how this shape works for us. So we're going to go back to create, do a line dimension, and I'm going to click from the center point out to each of the sides, and then same thing down here. Now while I'm doing this, it's a good point to mention that there's Revit is notorious for an order of operations. One of the scenarios is you always have to kind of follow this set kind of protocol, or else some things might actually blow up on you later on in the process. And what I'm doing here is actually kind of one of those processes. So click on a dimension. We're just going to go equal. Click on the dimension, go equal. And then I'm going to drop in 2 more dimensions just under create and aligned. If anybody's a typer, the quick key command for dimensions is D and I. Just pop this up there. All right, so now we've got 2 dimensions and we've got a series of equalized dimensions. And all this really means is if I say pick on one of the lines over here and start dragging it, you can see it maintains that equidistant dimension. Now, what I want to kind of add real quick, I was talking about an order of operations, and I'll kind of start picking up on these things as I go through, because it is very specific to understand the order of how things are done. So nobody has to do this part. I'm just going to do this for demonstration. I'm going to delete these 2 dimensions, and I'm going to come in and go dimension to the 2 outsides first, and then I'm going to actually stretch this guy over to make him something different, and then come back, click the 2 sides, and then go to the center. Oh, it actually worked. It didn't used to work. So one of those things I didn't get to test, but we'll go ahead and leave that in place. But what would have happened is it would have likely come back with constraints, kind of a broken error, and it wouldn't have let me stretch the way I just did there a second ago. But apparently that's not an issue anymore. It's working. So we'll just keep moving forward. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually start developing some dimensions. Or some parameters. So let's click on that top dimension we have, and we can do this 2 places. We can come up to here where it says label, go none and add parameter, or we can come up here to the 4 boxes, which is a type catalog or a family type catalog area, and we can start adding parameters from in here too. Just 2 options to do it. Both of them will bring you to the same place. So we're just going to go add. And we're going to do 2 types of parameters. We're going to do a type parameter and an instance parameter. That way I can kind of showcase what the difference are between the 2. So the first one we're going to call width 1. We're going to leave it as a common. We don't have to really mess around with any of these other things. Type of parameter. We've got a lot of options here that are available to us. For this guy, we're just going to leave him as a length, because that's what he is. We're going to group him under dimensions. We'll leave him as a type. Then we're going to add another parameter. Going to call him W2. We're going to make him an instance parameter. And same thing, we're going to leave it at common, leave it at length, and leave it at dimensions. And then click OK. And then click OK one more time. And what we're going to have in here is we need to assign these parameters now to these dimensions. So we're going to take the top one. We're going to make him, this is going to be 0, 0. That's going to give me an error. Let me just put a value in here real quick for each of those. I just did 1 foot. And then we'll change this to W1. This guy goes to W2. So we get a nice square. So in this, I want to showcase the relationship of type parameters to family parameters. So now that we got that set up, we're going to come back to our family types area over here. And we're going to do, up at the top where it says family types, we're going to go new. And we're just going to go width 1, space 1 foot. And this is just a name. We can kind of name it whatever we want. And we're going to do another one. Width 1, width 1, 2 feet. Now I can see I can kind of start flipping between the 2 of them here. Well, I'm going to leave the 1 foot at 1 foot down to this value and just leave it as is. I'm going to come down to the 2 foot, change this value to 2, leave that as is, and then click OK. Now I'm going to come in here and essentially I can start kind of going around and flip back and forth, and you can see how it kind of updates that piece automatically. Whenever we have this embedded into a family later on, we can basically select the type out of the type editor and tell it whether it's W1 that's 1 foot or W1 that's 2 foot. Now, an instance parameter, actually, we won't showcase that here so much. Now, an instance parameter means you won't have to have a type for like what we just developed a second ago. You can basically have the number be anything you want. And to demonstrate, we do real fast family. And this guy, I'm just going to do a generic model. And I'm just going to showcase this part just to kind of illustrate the type parameter. It's because all I'm trying to kind of talk about here. And let's go insert. Oops. Let me go back and grab that family and bring them over. Loading the project. I have 2 family 6s open. Let me fix that real fast. One of them is, we don't need to be seeing him yet. Yeah, this guy can close. We don't need to see him now. All right, loading the project. Okay, we should have him in here now. And let's go ahead and create, and this is one of the things that the profiles are going to be used for, is things like sweeps and rails. So we'll do a sweep, and we're just going to sketch a path. And I'm just in the 3D shot at the moment. Come draw something out. Go ahead and finish that sketch. And then I'm going to come in here and edit the profile. Now I've already pulled in the family, so I can select one or the other. I'm just going to go with W1 for now. Finish it. And of course it extrudes it along that path. Now, what the great thing about having the type selector kind of set up, I can select this guy now, come in and change it out for the other one, and just start going back and forth. And so that'd be an instance of kind of having the same family doing multiple things at the same time. Now, with that, we're going to have a situation where, and let me copy this guy over a couple times, just to kind of show the difference with the instance parameters now. And really, all this is just ways to kind of control certain elements of these families. So we're going to take this guy, make him 2. We'll do this one at 2 as well. That looks good. That looks good. All right. So we're going to come back into this guy, go edit sweep. Come in here, select a profile. And I'm not going to be able to work with the instance parameter here, which is unfortunate. We'll have to touch up on that later. So let me just shrink that guy down. One of the other problems with not having properly prepared up front. So I'll just go ahead and go edit type. I'm going to modify him. Okay, so I can talk about the instance stuff here in a second. We'll just kind of keep moving forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm coming back to our profile family that we created. I'm going to come back to my family types editor. And I'm going to click on the W2. And all I'm going to do is just modify this guy and tell him to go back to being a type. Just to kind of keep that simple for the time being. So real quick, that was a kind of a fast example of kind of developing a really kind of a super simple family as far as a profile goes. Now we're going to use this profile a little bit later on, but I really want to show you guys that type and instance thing a little bit better. So we're going to build another family really fast. And we're just going to go new family. And this guy is just going to be a generic model. But this will give me a better chance to kind of showcase the type and instance, because I really want you guys to get that part. This part is so annoying. Bear with me here. Whatever. Come on, just snap into there for me. Okay, good. All right. So for the, like I said, I just want to kind of showcase type and instance real fast. Open up a generic model, and I'm just going to go to the regular floor plan. Got to do an extrusion under create. Just draw a regular box. I'm not going to worry about applying any particular parameters to this guy at the moment. I'm just going to get a box started. And let's see. So what we're going to want to do with this guy, let me edit the extrusion again real fast. Do kind of the same thing we did before. This will have a height component to it that we can utilize. Just drop those dimensions in there. Equalize those guys. Equalize those guys. Add a parameter to this guy. We'll call him with 1. If I'm going too fast, let me know.
You are. Yeah.
Okay. So all I'm doing is repeating the same steps that I did before when I created that profile.
That was fast.
Okay, I'll slow down. So, and like I said, I really just want to get over the concept of type and instance here real fast, just to get it out of the way. So just basically hitting DI or going to create for dimensions, dropping them in there, and of course, after I get the dimension in there, just clicking on the EQ symbol to get it to equalize out. And then as far as creating the parameters, I showed you guys the method of creating the parameter over here first. The other way to create the parameter is to select on the dimension itself, go label, add, and then likewise, I'll give it a name. We'll leave it at length and comment, and we'll keep this guy type as well. And so we've got 2 dimensions that we can work with here. Go ahead and finish that up. Now I'm just going to the 3D shot right now, and the button for the 3D is the little house up at the top, the little axon of the house. Just click on that. That'll take you straight to the 3D. For kind of orbiting around, just hold down Shift and middle mouse button. That'll kind of get you around. And of course, I'm always a big fan of the cube for kind of getting those straight-on views and the orthos. Okay. So now what I've got here is I've got this kind of really generic box that we've just popped in. Let's go ahead and flex a little bit to make sure everything works. So back up under Modify, just back up under the Family Types Catalog editor. I'm just going to type in some numbers. We'll just make this guy 4 feet and this guy 2 feet. And as soon as I hit apply, we should see it flex properly. It does. And that works. The next thing I want to do is kind of the same process we did before. Family types. We're going to go new. Going to call this W1 instance 1. Another one, W2, number 2, and one more, W1, 3. Okay, so we've got those 3 in there. And of course, we can kind of pop in here and start kind of plopping in different values. So for the W1, the first instance, I just put in the values of 4 foot and 2 foot. Under number 2, I'm going to really kind of expand it a little bit. We'll go 10 feet, 20 feet. And W3, we're going to go 6 feet and 6 feet. So we'll have 2 kind of odd rectangles and a nice square to work with. and then click OK. Now, when I come in here, I should be able to select on this guy, go to my properties box. Oops. Okay, so we got that. So properties, oh, I'm sorry, I wanted to go to project browser. For the next part, we're going to add one more parameter, and that's a height parameter. And that's the parameter we're going to set up as an instance parameter. So for this guy, we can do it from any of the elevation shots. Personally, I always like to use front and left just to kind of keep the consistency. So I'm just going to go front. And we're just going to do create. Sorry, annotate, my mistake. Annotate, we're just going to select on the level, select on the top of the box. Of course, I can flex the box up and down if I want to now. Notice whenever you click on the box, you'll get these little key grips that you can start working with. And of course, it live updates the number as well. We'll go ahead and click this guy. We'll give him a parameter. We're going to call him H1, N1. No, just kidding, H1. And we're going to let him as an instance. Okay, so now we've got that. So let's take this family out for a test and make sure this thing is going to work for us well. So being a family, we're going to want to use this thing inside of the project area. So we're going to go new project, and we're just going to click on the architectural template. And then click OK. Okay. What I did there just a second ago to kind of get all the window tiles back is the quick key command for it is WT. It just stands for window tile. And I believe it was family 7 for me. It'll probably be family 2 for you guys. Just load him into the project, project 1. Okay, so I'm going to place three instances here, or three pieces. Let me kind of zoom in here. All right, so right now they're all showing the same type. It was probably the first type that we had created, type number 1, the W11. So over this guy, I'm just going to select the next one, and I get the option of, under the properties browser over here, of selecting the different types available to me. So I'm going to do this guy at number 2, and do this guy at number 3. Go to a 3D shot, and let's select these guys and copy them down one more time. Okay, so what I've got here is I've got, and we can say these things are, widgets or something, or maybe they're a column or something along those lines, where it's got to be fairly consistent dimensions for a lot of pieces. And let's say there's an example where if we need to make an adjustment to this guy, but we understand that he's copied all over the place, we need that to update on every one of those instances. Then in that case, it's as easy as coming in here and just changing the values. Let's say he needed to be doubled. So we'll just go 8 and 4. Let me pull this over. Click OK, and you can see it modifies those two pieces at the same time because it's the same type family that exists. Now, the one thing that we wanted to be variable in here was the height. So what we're going to do is basically set up a height that's different for each and every one of these pieces. So for this guy, we're just going to start typing in some numbers here. So we're going to go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. So you can see that I've got, and this is just a way to kind of showcase the difference between types and instances. Even though this guy is the same family type as the other square that's located down this way, and those type parameters will copy between those guys, the instance parameter allows me to have variable values now. So it doesn't have to be the same thing copied over and over again. I can now start adding variety in to these families and pieces. I can always come in here and just say, give me something really crazy. Start working kind of information like that. Now, kind of an example. Now, this was just a box, and this was really, really simple, just for speed and expediency's sake. But an example of where you would use this in kind of the professional realm would be like, say, for example, you had a family for an awning. And you're going to have, you know, let's say it's out in the middle of a retail, and there's a whole bunch of awnings, and they're all 10 foot wide and 4 foot tall and 3 foot deep, you know, the same thing over and over and over again. But you could, you know, make the argument that, you know, for design wise, maybe you're sticking different fabrics and different kind of materials or textures on it. In that case, because you've got such a high variety of textures to go with those awnings now, that would be a perfect example of developing an instance parameter. In this case, it would be based around materials, which, speaking of which, is a good idea. Let's talk about one other parameter I want to talk about with you guys, parameter type, and that's the material parameter. And we'll apply it to this block. So we've got these guys in here. They're looking good. We can either kind of cycle back, switch windows, oops, and go back to our family, or you can just do WT, and of course it opens up all the windows and you can see which one that you want to go into from there. Okay, so let's see, we're back in our block family. I'm just going to come up here and click the house again, go back to my 3D view so I can kind of see what we're looking at. And let's have a conversation about the other kinds of parameters that we can build into this thing. So I'm just going to go to the family types catalog again, the up in the area with the 4 little blue boxes up in the top left corner. Go add parameter. And of course, I'm just going to go down the type of parameter and just kind of talk about these real fast. So you can do some interesting things with these guys. Text parameter is nothing more than just kind of basic text information. An example of that would be, let's say we had a manufacturer for this box, and the manufacturer was, you know, widget XY or something along those lines. There's nothing physical about that parameter. It's merely just text, and that's text that we can schedule out later on in, you know, a series of schedules for, you know, bidding purposes or whatever the case may be. Integers and numbers are kind of like what you guys saw in Grasshopper with Rhino. You know, one is just whole numbers, the other one is inclusive of decimals. But basically, these are just numeric values. And what we can do is we can start adding in kind of formulas and things like that into these integers and numbers. Oops, let me come back. Area, we can start designating area in the parameters, volume, angles, slopes. For takeoffs, we can talk about currency values in case we understand the material, the value of a material or the value of this block that we're building. You know, it's $100 or something along those lines. We can drop in a value in there, and then of course we can schedule that information as well. The other one I really wanted to talk about was material, and I'll go on that here in depth in a second. Image, you never ever really use image too much. Yes, no. Yes, no is basically, it's kind of a logic statement. It's a logic command. It's, you can kind of think of it as binary code. It's zeros and ones. It's just on or off. That's all it really stands for. But I'll show you an example of what that can be as well. But let's go back to material. And let's call this guy just material for now, because we're going to modify him and change him up. The name at this point isn't really particularly important. And we'll make him an instance. And we'll click OK. And we're going to make him instance because with all these boxes we just created, we want each one of them to be a different material that we can work with. And then click OK. OK, so we've created this parameter. And what we need to do is essentially apply it to this guy. And just like what we had done before, you can kind of select on this guy and you come over to the properties box over here. And you can see we get a couple of options in here. Now, like I said, this box is particularly simple, so that's really available to us here yet. We have information regarding to the extrusion itself, graphics information talking about its visibility, the visible graphic overrides, whether we want it to be visible in plan or elevation, or whether it's going to have a detail value associated with it. And I know I'm not really going over a lot of that stuff in detail, which is unfortunate, but we don't really have the time at the moment. Subcategories for none, and this is essentially we can start controlling line weight and stuff like this to this point. But that's going to be a topic for next class when I talk about kind of line weights and how to start getting really nice drawings out. And then of course the last one, and I kind of showed this to you guys last time, where you can make it a solid or a void. And it just basically changes it to the orange shape. We'll leave it at a solid for our purposes. And what we want to do is we want to go to the material, and we want to click the little box up in the top right hand corner. It's got the 3 dots. Oops, my mistake. It's not, I'm sorry, it wasn't the box with the 3 dots. It was the little tiny sliver of the box on the far right side. That's where we're going to associate the new parameter that we just created. So we're going to click that guy, and of course it brings up the kind of dialog box for these parameters. We're going to go select the material we created, click OK, and of course if we did everything right, the box should gray out. Yep, everything grayed out. So we can't technically apply a material here in the family now. We're going to apply this material in the project. So we've made our adjustments. Let's go ahead and load this guy back in the project. It's going to ask us if we want to overwrite. Just go, yep, we'll just do the top one. Overwrite the existing version. Now for this, I don't know what kind of materials are loaded in here by default from the architectural template. So let's take a look and see where they're at. If you go to the Manage tab, and under Manage, you'll see the Materials tab on the far left. Go ahead and click that. And this will tell us what all materials exist in the project. It looks like we got a nice kind of healthy list that we can really work with. A lot of bricks, a lot of woods, concretes, some default mumbo jumbo, some glazing. That's nice. Okay, we can work with these. There's plenty in here. So we can just go cancel for the time being. Now materials are going to be color related, so we're going to want to make sure we have hidden line turned off and want to have textures and things like that turned on. So at the bottom of the screen, where it says things like the scale 1/8 inch equals 1 foot, sun path, you can do shadows and things like that. We're going to look for basically it's a little kind of axon box, but it's called the visual style. And we're going to change that. Come on. Yeah, for what we're going to do is we're just going to put it to realistic. Realistic always takes up a little bit more kind of RAM on the computer, but since this is a simple box, nothing to really worry about, we'll go ahead and do that. Now zoom in here. And kind of like what we did before, whenever we clicked on the height and kind of just went around and started changing these things, we get that same option to where we can now go through and start kind of modifying these materials. So for this guy, and at this point I'm just kind of clicking at random just to kind of showcase something obvious. We'll go asphalt shingle. This one, let's make him brick. This guy, let's make him cherry. This guy, and I won't go through all of these, it's just kind of showing what you can do. We'll make one of these guys glass. So we got some transparency, we got different materials that we can start kind of working with. This is just an example of kind of once again kind of showing what you can do with an instance parameter. Let's say, for example, we wanted to come back and we realized, you know, we've got all this instance stuff is working out fantastic, but the type values needed to change. It's easy as it was before as far as adjusting the value. So this box and this box will maintain their kind of XY dimensionality. Come back here. Let's bring this guy down to size, make him a square. Click apply, okay. And then of course that just pulls both of those two guys together, but it doesn't touch anything that was instance related. So it still maintained all the kind of overrides that we did for the heights and the materials. Now, since we're working with this, this will give us an opportunity to do a couple of other things since we're working with such a simple object. One of the other things I wanted to talk to you guys today was kind of formula syntax kind of information. And we'll use one of these boxes to kind of go over that. So let's go ahead and go back to our box family. And once again, you can click on it and go edit family or just kind of cycle back to it. And for here, all we're going to do is just go back to our family types category and start taking a look at how we can start developing relationships with these dimensions that we've set up. Now, I'm kind of going over this in a kind of a simple fashion right now because I just want to get some basic concepts down. We're going to get a little bit more advanced in the latter half of the class whenever we go through and actually construct the paneling system. But before we do that, I want to really ground in this kind of information first. So let's take a look at these W1s and W2s. What we want is kind of a relationship between these two numbers. So for example, in kind of a simple way, we can say W1, oh, I'm sorry, W1, I wanted to say W2, and we'll say, let's go times 2. And what this is going to say is that for whatever the value of W2 is, it's going to double it. So I'm going to click out of that. W2 is not a valid parameter. Oh, FYI, whenever we do these formulas and we're kind of referencing back to these parameters, it's case sensitive. So I did lowercase w, I want it to be uppercase W. And it goes. And then of course I can change this value here. It will automatically start updating that. And of course it goes both ways, so I can adjust one or the other. Make this guy 2 and do whatever. Now, of course, we can do other kind of pieces to this. We can do division. We can get a little bit more complex and go to parentheses, and you can start doing parentheses and brackets as well. W2 plus 2. Of parentheses is not expected. Hold on a second. Oh well, back to that later. But you can do those kind of formulas as well. You can make them, another way to kind of do equals is just kind of put W2 in there. So whatever value is for one, it becomes the value of the other. Start working it that way. But let's go ahead and put in an actual value we can work with. So let's say, for example, let's do sine W2 should work. Oh, come on, work with me here. Just the units. Okay, well, we'll keep it simple. One of the problems of not being able to test all this stuff out before class. I'm not going to try and troubleshoot it too much here. We'll keep it simple. So it's just going to be a value of doubling up. And click OK. And what we'll do is we can just go load in the project. We can see real quick that what's going to happen is all these squares that we created, they're all going to disappear, and they're all going to start basing those dimensional qualities based off of the new formula that we just put in there. Overwrite the existing version, bam. Kind of a quick example of kind of dropping in some of the kind of formula. Now, there's a lot more to the formulas than what I just described. If you want to start kind of going through that stuff, there's actually a great section in the help that goes into real depth about everything that's available to you as far as doing this. Besides the simple math that I just did, you can go as complex as doing, calculus. as far as mathematical formulas that you can develop. You can also start doing things along the lines of logic statements, if and then, or those kinds of things as well. And you can really start to develop some really intelligent and complex families. So we'll do that. Let me go back to the family one more time. And I'll go back to my 3D, which is just the 3D house up at the top. And I want to showcase one more type of parameter. And one of the reasons why I'm showing you guys these specific ones is these are the ones that you'll use more often than anything out in the professional world, and likewise in the academic sense as well. It's just the most common ones that you'll really work with. We're just going to go add parameter. And we're just going to call this one visibility. And what this guy is I talked about the yes/no parameter earlier. It's just an on and off switch. That's what we're going to do with this guy. So we're going to select him, go yes/no under type of parameter, and click OK. And all that comes with is a checkbox that we can work with. And then click OK. And then come back here to this guy. And then, of course, like as we applied the material before, we'll need to select on the box so we can apply the visibility parameter. So you can see where we had up under here, there is a graphics kind of parameter already kind of built in called visible that has a check mark. What we're going to do is just click on the parameter button to the right side there, which is the little sliver. Just set it to the visibility parameter we just created. And let me make sure real quick that I set that guy to be an instance. I didn't. Let me set it to an instance real fast. So to get there real fast, to set it to an instance, we'll just go up to our family types, which is the 4 blue boxes. We'll click on visibility, modify, set it to an instance, and click OK. And OK. Go ahead and load him back into the project. And we'll overwrite the existing version. And let's say, and I'm just showcasing the way the parameter works is all this is really is doing. I can come back down here and just start clicking pieces on and off. They're still there, but I'm just modifying their visibility. So we could undo. Okay, so just to kind of get started off with kind of real kind of basic ground pieces, what we just kind of talked about are the kind of main parameters that you're going to end up using most of the time whenever you start building things. So now that we've done that and kind of gotten that piece out of the way, let's build something cool and have some fun. So I'm going to go ahead and close this project out because we're not going to need this thing anymore. I'm going to close this box out because we don't need that anymore. And close him out. We don't need him anymore. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just kind of save off this profile because we are going to use this profile later on that we created. So I'm just going to go ahead and save him. Save as family. I'm just going to cancel out of that. That's just the auto save that pops up. And let's see. Desktop, private class. This is going in 4.1. We're going to call this guy the profile. And square. Save. Okay. So I can go ahead and close him down now since I know where he's saved. All right. Excuse me. So let's build some kind of intelligent pieces and kind of start working with these things and seeing where we can go from there. So we're going to go up to the big R, the application button. We're going to go open, or I'm sorry, new. We're going to go family. And let's see, why don't we start with starting to create this curtain panel. So look for curtain panel pattern base. And then click open on that guy. And this should be I think I'd showed this kind of workspace before. I told you guys how there's kind of like different workspaces. This one should just be kind of a grayed out workspace with a real simple kind of grid laid out onto it. Now what we can do, is we can select on the grid, and we get a couple of options with this guy. This is kind of the start to developing this kind of panel family. And as we develop this panel family, all that same kind of stuff we just talked about a few minutes ago with setting up your dimensions, setting up your parameters, things like that, all that stuff still applies here. But this is something that we're going to be able to really kind of work with and manipulate and do some really interesting things with that we can apply to the surface of a building eventually. So let's take this guy, and we get a couple of options as far as kind of like grid patterns and layouts that we can work with. By default, rectangle is just pops up, but we can go coursing steps, arrows, hexagons, octagons, rectangles, rhomboids, triangles, kind of zigzag patterns. For this one, let's do an arrow. Nothing like being complex. And basically what it does is it comes back and gives you kind of a pattern of how this guy works. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this arrow and we're going to basically develop it into a shape that we can modify either on the fly, or we can have our type parameters or instance parameters that will eventually be applied to a building. So let's start working with this guy. Now, from inside this area, there's all sorts of like little modeling tools and mass modeling things. What I'm going to show you in here is a technique from mass modeling that's particularly effective as far as adding parametrics to it. One of the things to understand is it really revolves around the use of nodes and lines to help start kind of create the forms, and then of course that's the skeleton that I talked about last time that we can start applying dimensions and things to. So let's start with a series of nodes. I'm just going to come up here, point element, click that. And, oops, hold on a second. Before I get too ahead of myself, we got to make sure we always kind of reference the work plane that we're working on. So I don't want to make sure I don't want to miss that step. So under modify, just click on set. And what we'll do is we'll start with number 1 over here. And you can kind of see as I zoom around over this guy, it's starting to select the different planes. Well, I want the XY plane. So I'm going to go ahead and select on that guy. Now I'm going to go grab my point element. And a lot of what we're going to do is a lot of rinse and repeat, brave repeat. So we'll just kind of go from there. So go ahead and kind of place them on top of the point that exists. That guy's good. We'll do set again. And we'll just start working our way around. Get the XY. Grab a point, drop it in. Send one down here. Set, XY. Grab a point. Now, real quick, you might wonder why, and you guys can keep going around and doing this because I'll catch up here in a second. You'll probably wonder why I keep setting the plane each time. Why don't I just set the plane once and call it a day? That would work fine in most cases, but I'm anticipating this pattern being placed on the surface that's not flat. So like I said, I'm going around in kind of a 1, 2, 3, 4 pattern, just kind of following the system that's set up here. Is if I was to, let's say, level everything based off of that first node where his XY plane existed, all these other values that we drop in will also exist on that same plane. So if this pattern all of a sudden gets applied to like a curved surface, it's going to start messing up all those other nodes that we're going to start placing. Which is one of the reasons, and it seems kind of tedious, that I'm just kind of going through at the moment and dropping these points in plane per plane. So we'll just keep working our way around. Node. Bam. And the last one. This one is called the pattern-based family.
Generic.
Well, I'm sorry, it won't be generic. It's just a curtain pattern-based family. So let me make sure I've got a point all over the place. I can't remember if I did 4. No, I didn't do 4. I missed one. Okay. Let me go ahead and drop him in there real fast. Okay. So now I should have a point on each one of these. And I do. Did I get one over here? Yeah, I got one over there. Okay, so I've got a point on every piece now. So for our case, let's come in here, and now there's a lot of geometry that's all bunched up together, so it may be difficult to select. So if that ever happens, just hit tab and it starts cycling you through the individual pieces. You get to our little node. Now when you click on that node, we basically get a series of options over here under the properties that we can start to manipulate and work with. All we're really curious about with this guy is the offset. And for this one, we're going to create a parameter. So we can either, if you remember how we made parameters before, we can come up here to the family types box. We can start developing our parameters in here for some of these dimensional qualities. So let's do that. So I just clicked on the 4 blue boxes under modify. So we're going to go add parameter. And let's call this guy height 1. We'll leave him at a type. We'll leave him at a length. And click OK. And let's do a few more. We'll call this guy H2, type, common length, that's all good. And add another one, H3, then one more, H4. Let's start plopping in some values. So H1 I'm just going to do at 4 inches. Kind of quick key command stuff here whenever typing in. You can either type in 4 and then do the inch symbol, or you can do 0 space, oops, that's an O, 0 space 4 as an alternative to get the same. But for H2, I don't want that to be a 4 inch. I want that to be 6 inch. We'll make this guy 2 inch. And we'll make this guy 2, 4, we'll go 8. That should give us some variety whenever we start kind of going around. And then click OK. And let's start working our way through. So we're just going to click on the first node, come down to his offset. We're going to change his offset to H1. And you can see how to raise him up from that plane we placed him on earlier. Question? Oh, yeah. So like I'll do for the number 2 over here. Click on the node, and under the properties box over here, there'll be a parameter called, or an option available to us called offset. And all I'm doing is there's a little kind of that gray sliver that's always kind of difficult to click on, but that's where we apply parameters. We can click on that. We can start applying the parameters we just created. All I'm doing here is I'm just going to kind of start going around the way. So number 2 gets a number 2, and he goes up a value of whatever 2 is set to. Same thing with 3. 4. And because I believe there were 8 pieces to this, I'll now start over again. So we'll do 5 at 1. 6 at 2. 7 at 3. And 8 at 4. Now, kind of looking at it, it's kind of difficult to really see with everything kind of compacted on top of itself. So let's take care of that, and let's create a scale parameter that should scale these numbers for us. So let's come up to family types again. And let's just do another parameter. We'll call this guy scale. Oops, my mistake. Let me remove him. It was an instance of me not looking at the properties of the parameters I created. So let me erase that scale and do it one more time. I created it as a length parameter. I didn't want it as a length parameter because we're scaling by a factor, a number here. So we'll do this guy at number, and then we'll come back and call him scale. And we'll give him a value of, let's say 4. And we will do this guy. We said he was 4 inches, so we'll go 4 inches times scale. And it's case sensitive, so you're going to make sure you get that. Okay, so it bumps him up to 1 for 4. So we can start working with that. So I did this guy at 6 inches. Oops. 6 inches times scale. What I'll do is copy this, Control C, and then just do paste, and then modify that to be 2, and then paste, modify that to be 8. Okay. So now we should be able to find real quick that if I come back and change the scale value, let's say to 12, the number should update automatically, and then that should work for us. So if I come back here to go OK, I can start seeing the values really start to plop up. And that'll work for us. Okay. So now that we got this, let's start adding some additional pieces to it. So we need to develop a skin for this thing. So for the skin, likewise as before, we're still building the bones here. We're just going to go reference. We're going to go line. And what we want to make sure is whenever we get this guy selected, we want to make sure 3D snapping is checked on. So we'll go through, going around to each of these points. It'll start working out and give us a panel that we can work with. That looks appropriate. Is everybody up to speed? Is any questions while we're moving forward here? Everything good? Didn't create a surface? All right, let me see if I can replicate why I wouldn't create a surface. Let me delete mine real fast. If it didn't create the surface, that's fine. We can just come over to create form and have it created for us. And of course, it'll give us the options of the 3D or the 2D. And we just want the 2D one. And while we're at it, let's also do something. I'm just going to test something here real fast and just see if this is going to work for us. Okay, that worked out fine. So all I did, because I want this thing to be kind of like this weird extruded block that we can work with. Everything should be chained together from those lines we just created that surface. If you select that chain of lines and the chain below, just get those two guys selected and do create form. It'll kind of finish and box it out the rest of the way for us. So we've got this great critter here. Let's keep kind of working and manipulating this guy. So the question is going to be, what do we want to do with this fella? I'm thinking what we can try and do is let's make him kind of space framey. Let's put some rails on this guy, like the profile that we had utilized earlier. It was the square. The square is okay. The square may not have been the best solution at this point. We may end up having to change it to a circle, but we'll see how it works. So let's do this. So we'll go ahead and select on this guy. That looks good. And what we need to do is we need to find a starting point that we can start working with. So all I'm going to do is just find the first node that I created. Yeah. Okay. So how I went to how I created the 3D, let me delete that guy, is I basically that series of reference lines we created earlier. I clicked this guy in conjunction with the ones that were already existing, and then just created form. Okay. So once we get that, go ahead and find that first node. It's probably a little difficult to read, but as you kind of swing around, you should probably be able to find it. They'll just say the number 1. But that's the node we're going to start with, and we're going to kind of keep going the same kind of pattern that we've been following so far. So what I want to do is we're going to have to tab around because we're going to have to get to this that first line we drew until we get to it. And basically, I just hit tab until it selected the one piece that I needed. That's what we're going to need. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to go set. And what we're going to do is we're going to want to set the work plane on this plane back here that's perpendicular to the point. Kind of get in there, tab around until we get to it. Come on. There it is. It took a few cycles to get through because I'm tabbing through the planes of the point. I'm tabbing through the planes of the line, so it's going to take probably a few clicks to get around to get to it. But if you've got any doubt about what plane you're technically on, you can always turn on the show button, and it will show you what plane that you're working with. So what we're going to do now is we need to basically kind of pull in that profile that we created earlier. So we're going to go Insert, Load Family. And I believe I placed this guy in my Revit folder on the desktop. Revit class, profile square, there we go. So we'll use this guy. Go open him up. Let's see. Cannot load detail families into families created from the pattern-based template. Well, I'm not going to try and troubleshoot that right now. We'll just work on the fly. So the thing we made earlier today, garbage for our purposes now, but the principles that I went over on it still apply. So that part of it at least wasn't a complete loss. What we're going to do is we're just going to make our own shape and work with it from there. So let's go back to create and let's find the circle. We're just going to do a simple rail. We should have that one plane selected that we'd selected earlier still set, and then just find the endpoint. It's not going to do that for me. It's killing me. There we go. And then pull it up. We can work with that. Let's see. Can I make this guy into something? I can. Great. Let me back up and go over it one more time, a little slower. Okay, so it's kind of difficult because it was, even though we kind of set that work plane earlier, apparently it was being kind of temperamental with us trying to get it set up. So I'm just kind of tabbing around until I get to the right plane. I think that's the right plane. Yep. All right. And we'll just pull this out to some ridiculous value just so I've got a nice area to work with. And once I get the circle drawn, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and select it. And you can see it gives me kind of a temporary dimension that I can work with. Well, there's a little kind of a dimension symbol below it. If you click that, it takes that temporary dimension and makes it a real dimension. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this dimension and we're going to turn it into a parameter that we can work with. So what we can do is we can go click on the dimension. And this is the other way of creating parameters, is add parameter. And let's just call this guy radius. We'll make him a type as well. And click OK. Now, of course, that radius is way too large, so we're going to want to pull him down. So basically, all I'm going back to is the 4 blue boxes again, where all our parameters live. And I'm going to modify his value. And let's just make him, let's go 4 inches. Keep him rather small. And that should keep him pretty tiny. Yep, that works. Okay, so now we've got this circle. It's on a correct plane, because essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to loft it along the reference lines that we created earlier to make all these kind of forms and shapes. So all I'm going to do is select my circle. Come on. And select the reference planes. To select multiple things, kind of same kind of Microsoft commands, you just hold down the control button and it adds to your selection. Shift will subtract from your selection. And do create form. Not form radial dimension. Fine. But that should get it around there for us. And that seems to work. I don't see any issues. All right, I can work with that. Now, let's go ahead and do some additional pieces and kind of finish framing out the rest of this guy. So we've got kind of a nice kind of curtain paneling system coming together. So right now, we've got too much geometry kind of building on top of itself. It's getting difficult to see. So let's go ahead and turn that stuff into wireframe. So that's just down at the bottom where we had our little Axon box where we could do realistic views and things like that before. We're just going to turn this to wireframe and turn off all those surfaces. Now for this one, shouldn't be too bad. Work with me here while we test this out. But we should need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we're going to have to drop in a few more reference lines. So if we come back up to our reference lines and do our lines, we want to make sure we have 3D snapping on. Let's go find that point again. And you want to make sure whenever you're snapping to the point and not some other edge. So the point will come up. We'll go ahead and click that. It will come down to the point there. Point there. And the point there. Let me see. That guy, and that guy. So I've got those. They work out fine. And then I'm going to need to do one more, which is basically this guy here and this guy here. So I'm going to do reference line again. Wait for it to give me my snap at the point. Get that. Same thing, snap at the point, and snap at the point. All right, so now I should have all my planes available to me. So let's verify real fast. This guy's good, this guy's good, this guy's good. And then the 2 valleys. And the 2 valleys are good. Okay, so we can work with that. So the same thing that we did before whenever we did the pipe rail, we're going to do the same process for these guys. So we're just finishing off this component is essentially what we're doing. So let's go get our circle again. It may be a little difficult to get to them. We do set real fast and see if I can't get it to work like that for us. There it is. Likewise, I just had to cycle through a bunch of times to really get to it. So we'll go back to our circle. Is it on the plane? It's on the plane. I can work with that. We'll do this guy slightly smaller. We'll do 3 inches. And what I'll do is I'll select my pieces and then go select my circle. Oops. There it is. And then, of course, the pieces, holding down Control, and then create form, wraps. I'm going to do a quick visual just to make sure we're looking good and go back to hidden line. Okay, that's looking proper. And let's do the two valleys now. So I'm just going to take this back to wireframe. And let's see if I can get a good visual angle on this guy here. Yeah, so we'll do set. We'll keep tabbing around until I get the plane I'm looking for, which is the one that's perpendicular to that line. So there's the first plane of the line. Come on, it's in there. It may take a while to cycle through because we've got point on point and lines on lines. So it's getting, there it is. It's just getting complex. So I've got my reference line plane set up. That looks good. Let's go ahead and do our circle. Let's get that on the right plane. Yes. And same thing with this guy. We'll just do 3 inches. Small fella. We'll just have to probably zoom in here because we've got a lot of geometries pulling together now. And tab around until I can get the entirety of the circle. Be careful whenever you're selecting on the circle. It might want to click the hemisphere. We don't want that. We want the whole thing. You'll just have to tab around until you get to the whole circle. So we've got that selected. So let's go ahead and select this guy and this guy, and let's create that form. I'm going to go back to hidden line, make sure everything is coming up nice. Hidden line is actually a little difficult to see. Let's go shaded. All right. So we got an interesting looking kind of system pulling together here. Let's see, what else would we want to do? Do we want this bottom guy in here? Yeah, we can work with that. Okay. So we've got that. Let's go ahead and create some material parameters. Because let's say we want the rails to be aluminum or steel or something along those lines, but we want the rest of the geometry to be glazing. So let's go ahead and go back to our 4 boxes, the family types, and let's create 2 material parameters. So once we get back to our family types box, we're going to go add. And let's call this first one mullion. Now that we know what the element is, we can be more specific with the naming so we know what material we're applying to a specific object now. And we'll leave him at a type. We're going to make this guy a material. That'll work. Then click OK. And then we'll do one more. And we'll call this guy glass. Same thing, change it from length to material. Type parameter, and click OK. Now, I showed you earlier where we can basically apply these material parameters inside the project, but we can also apply, it's a more limited palette, but we can still build from it. Apply some basic kind of materials from inside this family editor as well. So before we do that, we need to first tell it what geometries need these materials. Or need the specific parameters. So let's do the railing first. And you may have to, if you get selected on one, you may have to hit tab for it to grab the chain. Looks like I grabbed it there. I grabbed that one. I grabbed that one. Looks like I've got all those pieces. That works. And I'm just going to come over here to where the slim bar was under the material. And we're going to do this guy as the mullions. That works. And then select the rest of my box, which I got the whole thing in one shot. That's nice. Oh, not quite. We're missing a piece. Come on. Still not getting it. Nope. If you get into a situation like what we're running into here, where there's so much geometry kind of on top of itself, it's difficult to select anything, you can temporarily hide stuff. So if you select on something that you just want to hide temporarily, if you come down to the bottom where things like the scale and the hidden line and all that was located, you should see a tiny pair of sunglasses, which stands for temporary hide isolate. Go ahead and select that critter. And we're just going to hide this element. So now this should let us start selecting these geometries. Okay. Now I'm wondering if I've got a dual kind of thing happening here. Oh, it doesn't matter. If it does, we can address it later. Come on. Okay, I've got everything selected. I'm just going to apply the material of glass to this guy. So that should take care of those. And to get that temporary hide and isolate turned off, go back to the glasses. If you notice real quick that it drew kind of a cyan box around everything, and just let you know that you've got some things temporarily hidden from your view. We'll go back to this box and we'll just do reset. Turns everything back to normal. And that looks good. Let's test this family real quick. And we're going to test for a couple things. We're going to test for flexibility, which is something you'll want to kind of constantly always kind of double check on these families as you're building them. You would hate to get to a point like where we just invested all this work and then realize that we'd screwed up a step in the very beginning and like, oh no, we've got to do all this work over again. That shouldn't happen in this case, but that's why we go through and do this kind of flexing and testing. So let's change that scale factor that we created earlier and verify that the geometry updates appropriately. So construction type, let's come down to where the scale was. Scale had a factor of 12. Just going to do a factor of 4 again. Click OK. It looks like it worked. So this is good. This means that geometrically the thing flexes properly. We can start working with that. Now let's double check the materials and make sure that we got everything selected and that all works out well. Now, like I said earlier, you can kind of start doing some material creation from inside the family editor as well. So under Manage, go to Materials. And we can change these values around later. But this is just for kind of getting some stuff kind of built originally. Let's see, we've got glass. We don't have a whole lot to work with. Not the greatest in the world. So let's do this. Let's create a new material. We're going to call it mullion. And we'll just give it some kind of obvious characteristics to verify that it's not gray and we know that we caught all our pieces. So if you come down here to basically it's a little plus symbol with on top of a sphere, it's just a create element. Go ahead and select this guy, create new material. It just does a default new material to begin with, but we can start kind of modifying some of its appearances. And all we're really curious about is just verifying that we got all the pieces, and that's all we're testing here. So all we're going to do is just modify its color, and you can pick any color you want. The only thing I'm curious about is just verifying that we actually picked everything. So I'm just going to pick something that's really going to stick out. So that green will definitely stick out, and that'll work. And then we already have a glass in here, so that'll work for us. So now that we got that, and that's all good. Let's go back to our family types, cancel, and let's put, which one was that one I clicked on? Glass. We'll apply glass to that guy. And this one will apply default new material. I forgot to call it mullion, but as long as it's a different color, just so we can see. Click apply and OK. And it looks like it's selected it all for us. So that works out well. I'm pleased with that. Okay, we can work with this. Now at this point, I'm pretty pleased with this family. We can really start. We can take them in and model a mass and kind of start working and manipulating them there. So real quick, I'm just going to save this guy, just in case something terrible happens. We're going to call this guy curtain panel and save. Okay. So let's get a weird shaped building put together that we can apply this new curtain panel that we created to and see how this thing works together and comes out for us. So we're just going to go New Project, Architectural Template, click OK. All right. So I'm not going to go too crazy with the massing here. I'm just going to get something quick that we can work with and start kind of going through some of these options and properties that are available to us with these curtain panels. So let's see. Let me see. I'm at a project base. Let me back out and do something slightly different. Let me go New again. We're going to go Conceptual Mass because I want to do some kind of goofy shape to begin with. We'll just click on Mass. Okay, well, we can work with this. So let's see. We set our plane. We're at the bottom here. That works. All right. So all I'm doing is just verifying that our plane is set to the XY at the bottom. And all I'm going to do, really simple. Let's do a polygon. And let's see, 6 sides. Yeah, we can work with that. Just kind of go out from the center. We'll do 80 feet. That works. Got a nice shape there. Now, if whenever you guys drew, let's say, for example, this may happen to some people. Whenever you drew this out, and if it didn't infill automatically, you have a little button up here called Make Surface from Closed Loops. Verify that you got that checked if you don't want it just to be line work and you want the surface to actually come through. So just in case. All right. So I got that. And what I want to do is I just want to copy this guy up in the Z direction because we're just going to make a little twisty tower that we can manipulate and do some weird things to real fast, just so we can start testing our panel and see how that works for us. So I'm just going to use my view cube. Oops, not quite yet. I want to get it selected. There we go. Now I'll use my view cube, and I'm just using it to get me to an elevation. Now I can either do create form or I can start a trip. However you want to go about it. And let's punch in a value. We're going to go 200 feet. This is a tower. We can work with that. And let's go ahead and give it a twisty. So we'll select the top panel, and we'll just do rotate. It's just going to rotate from the center by default. And let's give that a value of 30 degrees. So nothing too crazy, nothing too kind of wonky or wild for us. If you want to, you can start kind of manipulating some of these points individually. Let's say some of these nodes, let's pull this guy down, that guy down, and that guy down. Yeah, got some weird, interesting things happening. Maybe this guy comes down a little bit more. And I'm just playing at this point. I mean, you can really kind of do anything that you want to do. So we've got that set up. Just for testing purposes, just to verify that this thing is going to work properly for us, we're only going to select one face to start working with right now. So any face that you want to choose, go ahead and select that guy. And what we have to do to it is we have to basically tell it that we're going to apply panel to it. And the process for this is called divide surface. If you come up here to the top right, there should be a button called Divide Surface that we can work with. And you can see it automatically starts to apply a grid to it. Now with this grid, we get a couple of options available to us. By default, Revit automatically has all the pre-existing patterns loaded into it. So you can kind of go through and see what each of them really entailed. The third step, this is the arrows. This is the one that we did earlier. And this is the kind of pattern that ours will end up filling. But real quick, I just want to kind of go through some of these options that are available to these to this panel. So we'll hold on to arrow for the time being because that's the one we had developed earlier, and take a look at some of these options here. So the first one up is border tile. There's 3 options available in here: empty, partial, and overhanging. What that means is every time this thing comes to an edge or the border of this object, you can see how it's a partial arrow, you got a full arrow there. all it's going to do is, let's say if I do overhanging, it'll continue the pattern beyond the border. So it's a full and complete pattern the entire way. Partial has what we had before, where it just automatically cuts it at the border. And of course, empty pulls it back to where only the complete ones exist. We're going to leave this guy at partial because we want it to fill in the entire space. And of course, you get some options in here where you can start messing around with the rotation of everything. Say, for example, let's do 45 degrees. Gives us an interesting kind of pattern that we might be able to work with. We can change up the number of, they call them U and V coordinates for this particular thing, but we can start changing up the number. So maybe we do a value of, I don't know, let's just do 8. And let's bump it up a little bit more on the bottom. Let's go 16, just a value of double. And of course, we can do kind of whatever we want to do with these numbers, and we can kind of play around with it after the fact. Of course, we can rotate the U and V independently. We did the full grid rotation earlier. That just basically took both the U and the V and rotated it. But if we didn't want to do that, we only wanted to rotate one individually, we could do that. So let me take that 45 and put it back to 0. And I'll come back and I'll just play around with the U one right for the moment. And let's just do this guy at 45. Yeah, not really digging on that. I'll just go ahead and put him back at 0 and put the overall grid back to 45. I was more pleased with how that looked. And I'll change these values back to 12 and 12. It just seemed to flow nicer to me, so I like that a little better. Okay, keep going through these areas here. Offset just basically pushes the pattern in one direction or the other. So let's say if we did an offset of 20 feet, you can start to see how the pattern starts to push. Oops, I said 20 feet. And of course, in the other one, it's the exact same thing. Now, as far as the pattern application goes, there's nothing here that indent's really going to really help us with. Component rotation, we can rotate the component based off quadrants, 90, 180, 270. We're not going to really need to mess with that. We can mirror the components or flip the components as well. But let's get our family in here and we'll see how that starts to manipulate. So I'm actually kind of curious how this thing is going to start looking for us now. So let's do, and you can do this two ways. You can either go back to the family and load in the project, or if you had it saved off, you can always go back and do insert. Oops, click on the project. Do insert, load family. Come down to my Revit class folder. Curtain panel, open. Takes a second, should be in there. And then of course, at this point, you can just select on the pattern. And under arrow, we should have another one now called curtain panel. Select that guy. It'll take a second to cook. And it puts it in there. Now, looking at this, I see some interesting things happening that I'm not a big fan of. Not a big fan of how it's doing this kind of stuff over here. Or that kind of stuff over there. I guess the easy solution, or it's not going to be easy in this case, would be to develop a, well, never, I guess we were laying out the forms to understand the overall dimensional quality so we could have it kind of end there perfectly. But I don't have an answer off the top of my head for getting this to clean up properly right now. I guess what we could do later on, and we'll test something, we'll try it. But looks like we've got the curtain panel in there. That seems to work nice. Let's modify it a little bit. The numbers over here that we have. and see what kind of effects we start to get. So let me come down to scale. Let me go back to 12. Take a second for it to cook. It's updating a lot of pieces. Okay. All right, we're starting to get something interesting. We can start working with that. But of course, from this point here, we can start applying the materials that we created earlier. Just click on the pattern and do edit type. And this is where I got all the parameters that we had showed up before. Let's do mullion. And let's see. Yeah, that's right. We are back into a mass project, so we're kind of limited on the materials. We'd have to create something. You know, while we're at it, let's just go ahead and create something. Do create new material. It's called default new material. That's fine. You can, oops, my mistake. You can right click on this guy, go rename. Let's call him mullion. And let's do something nice with him. So essentially what we're going to have here with this guy is there's a texture library that's included. And essentially they copy the library over from 3D Max. So we have access to all those kind of initial materials. So let's create something that we can work with. Let's see. Duplicate this asset, replace this asset. Edit user defined libraries. I think this is where we need to go. Nope, that's not it. Was this it right here? Is this the asset browser? Okay. What I was looking for was the asset browser. It's essentially where I told you before all the kind of like 3D Max materials and things like that kind of exist. So let's do that. Let's go find a metal material that we can work with. Let's see, it's 3:10. Do you guys want to take a little break before we go any further, or everybody good to keep cooking? Everybody good? Okay, we'll keep cooking. Mullion, let's go back to the browser. We kind of open this guy up so we can kind of see what's available to us. And let's see, for our purposes, we can kind of choose either one. It's kind of the same material over or duplicated, but we want something metal. And I'm just going down to metal and clicking on aluminum. And let's see, we've got a lot of options for aluminum in here. Let's see. Yeah, we'll just go for polished aluminum or dark. Yeah, it doesn't matter. We can click whenever one you like. Anyway, double click it. It should automatically replace that asset and call it that, which it did here. Now, I'm not going to go too much into material creation today. That'll be the next session. I'll kind of tell you guys how to kind of create your own custom materials, anything that you can really think of. An example would be, maybe we'll do something along the lines like stained glass windows or something like that. That's always kind of a fun one to try. But we've got a kind of a quick tutorial on some creation of the stuff that exists in the program to begin with. So we can work with the mullion here. Let's go back to graphics. None of this is going to matter for us at the moment. And then click OK, click Apply, OK. Then we should get rid of that nasty green color. And we should go back to a nice gray is now. So we can work with that. There is something that's really bugging me about this panel system that we're going to fix and clean up right now. Hopefully it will take care of this stuff on the outside as well. We'll see what it does. So the panel looks good. We can work with that. Oh, actually, I didn't even think about this. Let's try this real fast. Let's select one of the other surfaces next to it and see if this information will kind of come across and work for us. We'll divide him up, leave him at 1212, which is what I believe this guy was set to, 1212. Let's come down here to curtain panel and see what it does. It's going to work. It's going to miter everything. Probably not. It won't, which is fine. It's doing some weird stuff to us, but we can work around that. Anyway, but for the most part, that kind of stuff works. I mean, this is just an example of kind of creating a kind of a curtain panel system that we can start working with and manipulating. If need be, we can come in here and select on the individual pieces. And if we had any instance parameters, which we didn't, of course, build in any instance parameters, we could come back and do something. Actually, that's a great idea. Let's do an instance parameter. Let's do an instance parameter of the material. That way we can have glazing on some, and we'll have a solid panel on some of the others. And then we can start kind of building in some variety into this paneling system. So you can do WT to kind of go back and get a view of all your windows. We'll come back to this guy. And so let's modify this guy a little bit. And let's do a couple of things. So first thing first, create. I want to go to my family types. And where was my glazing? There it is. It's technically not glazing anymore. I'm just going to rename it, which I can't. It's out of, so I can't mess with it. That's fine. Can I modify it? Yes. Can I do instance in here? Yes, I can. Okay, we're going to rename it. We're going to go from glazing to panel. We're going to change this guy to an instance. Click OK. We're not going to change anything else. It's just the only two pieces we're going to modify. Click OK, OK. That looks fine. Load this guy back in a project. We're just going to use the top one, overwrite the existing version. It's going to take a second to cook, even more so because I had selected two faces now. So it's calculating twice the information. And that works. Okay. So let's test this and make sure this works. So all I'm going to do is just come in here and start kind of tabbing around until I can start getting to some of these individual pieces. And let's see, I'm going to grab these bottom ones. I'm just using tab to kind of get around and get those guys selected. And if I come over here to the properties, I should be able, here I am, glass. Let's change that from glass to something else. And for this one, we'll just click something that's, actually we'll go with mullion, what we had before. So those guys should become solid. And of course, the rest is all glazing. That works. And I guess say, do the similar kind of option over here, which the rotation is different. Oh, that's right, I changed the rotation. Now let's fix that. I believe I did 45. Let's see, was that guy 45? This guy's 45. Okay, we can work with that. So now I should be able to select that one there, and then one more there. Work. Change out the material for this guy. Go do mullion. Okay. So that process seems to work. Had a little straggler down there below, but but the basic idea is that you can start kind of developing, creating your own kind of mullion systems and things along those lines. For this guy, let me go ahead and save this critter, so we might be able to come back to him later on and do something. Save as, family, and we'll just call him Tower. Now, I pulled down a couple of additional families that I kind of want to show you guys. And these aren't mine or anything along those lines. This is from a friend of mine. His name is Marcelo. But he's popular on the Revit circuit for kind of developing kind of weird and crazy things like this. One of the things that he was known for is, let's see. Let's shrink this guy down, shrink him down. I've got a couple of his families that we can take a look at. Let's see, he did a lift and a cow. Let's take a look at the lift first, and then we'll take a look at the cow and kind of see some of the weird kind of things you can do with some of these massing tools. So we'll do the lift first. Open. Now, of course, I've got these out there on Google Drive, so you guys can open these things up and play with them and kind of do whatever you want with these things. And that'll work. Okay, so give you kind of a little bit of backstory behind why they had to develop this thing. Essentially, they had a, and I can't remember exactly what it was, the type of building they were working on, but essentially, as part of the building, they needed a lift to maintain certain equipment. But the issue is it was difficult to get to the equipment in the building. So they spec'd out a lift, but they didn't know if the lift would actually fit. So they tasked Marcelo with essentially model the lift per spec, and then let us know if you come back with any conflicts, which is a good thing that he ended up doing that, because he came back and realized that the model of lift that they chose didn't actually work. But all this guy is a real simple kind of example of kind of some of this fluid flexibility you can build into some of these families. And like for this instance here, I don't have the model of the actual finished lift, but what's important here is some of these kind of properties that he sets up with this lift. So for example, he does this thing called the rotation rig, where it's essentially, it's real simple. There's nothing more to it beyond the point of rotating around a central axis. Is essentially all it is. But I'll go to 3D so you guys can kind of see what this thing looks like. Oh no, I did get a copy of the final one. Let's see if it's actually functional. Let's see. I don't think. Nah, the final piece wasn't functional. His was, mine's not apparently. But still, what I did want to showcase here is the kind of series of rigs that he had kind of set up and created, where you can kind of dynamically come around and kind of manipulate the geometry just by simple dragging and pulling. You don't necessarily have to put in any kind of real values and start getting that. His was a little bit different. His rig actually worked. But let's see, did he have the rotation rig down here too? He did. Does that rotate? Yeah, it's rotated to that guy. Anyway, this is just a fun family for playing around with, is kind of all I want to kind of showcase. The other one was the cow. So he ended up modeling a, an organic shape. And in this one, it was a case he remodeled a cow. Let's kind of zoom in here. And he built parametrics into the cow as well, to where basically this one was simple. All you could do was rotate the head and have it move up and down, that kind of movement. But the idea that, let me kind of erase this rig so we can see. But how he did it was actually, really simple. It wasn't as complex as it really looks. All he did was do a series of profiles, and then he just swept along the path. Is all he did to create this critter. But of course, he did the head separately, the body, kind of the legs, and then ended up kind of just mirroring the object over, and ended up getting a full cow. If you guys ever YouTube like Revit cow or anything like that, or Revit elephant, he does like a lot of kind of weird shapes and animals, things like that. But you'll see a series of videos and things that kind of showcase kind of what you can do with some of these massing elements. So it doesn't technically have to be a building, but all the reason I wanted to show this was kind of the power and kind of flexibility you have with these massing elements. I mean, you can do a cow, for goodness sake. We've got 20 minutes left. There was a question earlier in the day. I'm trying to remember what it was about. Oh, the exploded axon. That's great. We can talk about that real quick. So what the question was, they had a situation. We're kind of jumping ship here real quick from kind of the family creation and modeling and things along those lines. So it's always that kind of exploded axon, that really good looking drawing that kind of shows all the components of the building. How do you basically pull that all apart and set up those views to kind of show the interior of the building and things along those lines? I'm going to kind of go through that really fast. And while I'm doing that, if anybody has any questions about anything, throw them out. Let me know, and we can start kind of tackling some of these, any kind of issues or questions. Or if anybody's working on a project right now that's in Revit, you have questions or something, now would be a good time to ask as well. So I'm going to go through this kind of fast just to showcase this, only because I don't have an actual Revit project or anything on this box to kind of show this. So I'm just going to go architectural template. I'm just going to build a quick building real fast. Okay, a couple of walls. Give me a floor. Take those to the outside. Finish the floor. Give me a roof. Level 2, yes. Give me an overhang of 2 feet. That looks good. Slopes 9 to 12. That's fine and dandy. Do you want to? Yes. And while we're at it, let's drop in a couple of doors. And of course, the swing is going the wrong way in a couple areas, but we'll forgive that. And let's drop in some windows. Okay, so let's take a look at this guy real fast. We got a basic house that we can work with. Okay, so let me do one more thing from the plan side. Just draw some interior walls. We got some craziness happening here. An issue where all these walls are doing that. Attached to the roof. Okay. Okay, so let's pull this guy apart and see how we can develop one of these views. So the first thing we have to do is kind of understand what angle we want to look at this from. Whether it's a true axon, or if we want to start really kind of manipulating and pulling it down. So, but for this guy, I'm just going to go for a true axon. I'm actually going to change up his slope real fast because it's too high. Give me a 4. That pulls it down a little better. Okay, great. So to do anything like this, what you have to do is you kind of have to lock the view down. So we're going to come up here, go to lock, save orientation and lock view. We'll just call this exploded axon. That looks good. And that's just going to keep me from accidentally rotating or doing anything weird like that. Okay. That looks fine. Now let's see. I want to go to view. And I just got to find it real fast. Where is it at? Nope, not displacement sets. Is it? No. Let me see here. It's still locked. You have to bear with me. I would have gone through this earlier, but I'm trying to remember where the command's at. Let's do a search real fast in case I can't find it. Exploded axon. Just need to find where the command's located at is the only thing. We'll redo that. Exploded axon. In Revit 2014, that's right, it was called displacement. So let's see. You select it in there. So let's see if that was it. No, it wasn't it. Show analytical model, temporary view properties. No, that's not doing it. I missed a button. Let's back up to the beginning. Let's see. Where did he go? He was under modify and he went up there. Okay, so let's do that real fast. So here he went to modify and he had, oh, here it is, I'm sorry. Okay, so once we got the view locked down, we can click on any of these elements, anything from the windows to the doors to the roofs, anything that's in the model, even generic families, or even if it was those curtain panels we pulled in earlier, which I should have done, it would have been a better example. But we can select that guy. The button is here, displace elements. From here, we can start kind of pulling it up and manipulating these things. Let's get this guy pulled up over there. Let's get this wall with this door, this window, this window, this window, window, that door. Let's do likewise, pull this guy out this way. And we can go a step further. Pull the windows and the doors out. Pull those out further and start kind of pulling this project apart. And of course, as we did that, we can kind of pull our pathing back and basically just snap the line to where it would make sense. That makes sense. One there, one there, one there. And for the door, let's go there, 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 and there. So real quick, that was just kind of a fast example of how to start kind of creating and developing these kind of exploded axon shots to kind of start pulling that stuff away. And of course, it doesn't have to be just straight up and down. You can start manipulating them across like so. And start pulling out more pieces. Really start to get it out of the way and really kind of start opening up what that interior space actually looks like. So you can create those. So that answers that question. Let's shrink down. Let's see. I didn't really get a chance to go over the stuff that I was kind of showing you guys from last week, did I? At the very end. Take a look at that stuff real fast. These things are all available for you guys to kind of grab onto and play with. 325, old. Let's take the hedgehog. Now, with the hedgehog, the way I built this thing, built it the exact same way of what we built that panel earlier today was, except instead of using the arrow that we ended up using, I used a just a regular square pattern to build this thing. But what I'm going to do is kind of pull that pattern out and show you some of the stuff I did to it, because I built some parameters into it. Okay. So let's turn off the section box. Oh, and this is a, we can talk about this a little later, I guess, but I started to do structural elements with this thing as well. But just an example of some of the weird things you can do. And it may look a little complicated, but this pattern is really, really simple. All it is a simple square that's been extruded up using the same techniques that we were going over earlier today. But with this one, it wasn't nearly as complex. It was just a series of 2 points, and I just gave it 2 heights that had a value associated between them to kind of show what you can do with that. And to kind of show you what was in there. Let's see, the difference, offset. Wow, I did basically the same thing today with that panel we did. So, but it's just an example of types of shapes and things that you can kind of pull out. Let me close that. That one was particularly simple. Let's take a look at that space frame, because he's a little bit more complex. Adaptive component reactor test. Nope, don't want that one. Adaptive wave. There we go. This one's going to take a little rougher to open. Okay, so this guy, it was kind of the same principle that we had talked about before. The panel, you just create a panel that's got a lot of geometry, parametric geometry built into it. This guy kind of follows the same kind of thing, but let me click on one of these individual components. We can really take a look at how this guy is built. Fit family. And of course, the scale is really kind of obnoxious with this one. So let's modify some of these dimensions down so we can really start to see what we're looking at here. So let's see, 10 foot. Let's bring that down to 1. Makes this look any better. It's getting there. Small, large. Let's make this 1 inch. I believe that was for the radius. Okay. So this guy, same thing before. I just based this one off of a square pattern. It's the exact same principles that we talked about earlier whenever we were creating that other family. One of the things that you're going to notice kind of with this program is that it's the same kind of processes, the same kind of methodologies over and over and over again. It's just you have a lot of variety of what you can do with these things. But for the most part, it's the same kind of commands that you're just going to do over and over and over again. It's just the variety you can build into it. So with this one, it wasn't anything particularly crazy. I did the same thing we did before with the points that were kind of offset. And then, of course, I just drew a series of lines to kind of start extruding and piping the shapes. But you can see this one, for the space frame for what it is actually fairly simple to construct. I think whatever we constructed earlier this afternoon was actually slightly more involved and slightly more complex than what this particular critter is. But of course, this is available for you guys to take and play around with. Apply the space frame to any kind of shape that you want to play with. Save changes to that. No. Let's see. This guy. Pull this out over here. So I had to do some interesting stuff to get this to work. If I can get it. I've got a family kind of hidden in here. Let's just see if I can get it selected. Nope. Come on, where's that? Got a profile. Nope. Edit family. Edit type. I don't know why I can't pull for family 8 out. Here's an example of kind of slightly more complex formulas that you can start to develop as far as these guys go. But I use that as just as a means of developing this wave. And I just want to get it pulled out. For some reason, it's not letting me do that. Let me go back to families. Generic models, family 8 is what I need. Edit. Okay. So it looked complex. It's actually not complex at all. All it is it's just a value. This is one of those adaptive things I used earlier in the last session. I used it to just kind of create a wave. Essentially, all this guy does is based off of a value or a node from wherever you put it. You can see how it starts to modify the height of the point up here. And this is where I kind of dropped in that one formula for kind of creating that guy. And I have 2 formulas in there you can actually take a look at. There's the wave, and then there's the poke. Copy him in there. Okay, so if I move it around, come on. Let me come back out. Yeah, we back up. I think I left it on the wave for a purpose. It was a much better parameter. Okay, apply okay. But you'd start to see it kind of move up and down. So yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. And I just used that to kind of get that. So say changes to family A, no. And what this guy is let me see if I can erase this thing. Kind of show you how I built this. Delete that surface. And I've got that. So whenever I built this guy, and really this is the same thing as those kind of balls that I showed you earlier, the circles, the spheres, where it was just an adaptive component based off of a point attractor, determine the size of the ball. Well, in this case, instead of determining the size of the ball, it essentially just determined the value of this height parameter based off of that wave function that I created. And of course, with this guy, go ahead and create a. Oops. Yep. There we go. Create a surface that we can work with. Take that surface, divide it, and let's keep it down fairly small, just for simplicity's sake. And that should work. And let's put a node out here. Okay. Let's do component, and I believe it was family 8. Family 8. So I'm just going to select one point there. And I got to do one thing to this guy first. Nodes, that's what I need. I didn't have these points, they weren't turned on to be selectable earlier, so let me delete that guy. We'll do this guy one more time. Component. And we will go from there to there. And then I should be able to select this guy, do an array of this. It'll take a second to cook. And then, of course, you can see how the different height values exist throughout there. I should be able to take this point now and move it, and you should start to see that update. So when I did that, let me put this a little closer. I want to try and make sure I can see all the lines for the most part. So once I did that, essentially it took a spline, and I got, everything looks good up there, yeah. Just started snapping to each of these points. I won't go for the entire round. I'll just do a couple back just so I can show what you can do with this. And I'll do one more row. Okay. So we'll just select these guys. Easy, same command as always. Create form, creates the shape for us. And as I come in here, I should be able to manipulate this, and then the shape should change for us. It didn't. I must have missed a step. That's my fault. Whenever I had applied those. What did I do over here? Oh, that's right. Those weren't reference planes. Nope, not a reference line. Okay, let me do that one more time. Select these guys. We'll turn these into reference lines. All right, now let's see if it... Actually, before I go that extra step, let's just verify she flexes. Okay, now it flexes. So now I can take this, create that form again, and then we'll test it one more time to make sure it flexes properly. Yep, and that critter works. And then of course from there, all it was selecting this fella. Once again, dividing the surface. And let's see, that's the value here is too great. Let's go 4 and 4. That's too small. Let's go 8 and 8, double it up. Actually, let's make this one 4. Oop, wrong one. 8 and 4. There we go. So they're kind of squarish. We can work with that. And that works. And then for this guy, and it's like I said, it's the same steps over and over again. It doesn't really get crazier than that. Surface and just turning on the nodes, they're selectable. Oh no, I'm sorry. I already did that step. We're already good. What we got to do now is select this guy, select the pattern I want, which was family 9 in this case. So it should be our space frame. Should pull our space frame in. And it came in upside down, which we can work with that. I should be able to flip the components. Component flip. Take a second to cook. Hopefully it doesn't break. Here we go. Component flip. But this is an example of kind of how I built that space frame. Now, obviously, I didn't build the space frame from start to stop, but it's the same kind of steps we went over earlier for the panel that we developed earlier that I used to create this. And it's the exact same steps. It's just, it was a different shape. It was the only thing that was really different. And then, of course, for the last flex, let's test this and see how well it works. Take this point, we'll move it closer, and now everything should build off of everything else. It'll take a second to update, but the space frame now should update. And, oh, cancel. Let's pull it back. I may be too close. Okay, there it goes. So just off the formula I had, I can't get the point too close, but I can manipulate it, do the attractor wherever I need to, and it should keep working. Yep. But this isn't. But this would be in a way to kind of start developing a series of iterations to kind of start working out design and things along those lines. But anyway, that's all I've got for today. If you guys got any questions or anything like that, more than happy to answer them. If not, then I'm going to stop the session from recording. And hopefully we should have all this up on YouTube so we can come back and look.